Good day, everybody. My name is Dennis Collier, and today's video is about the incredible sport of adventure racing, which, of all the sports I've ever covered here, has to be the most extreme, certainly in terms of the physiology, but also, I think, in terms of the psychological aspects. Now, you know, I am a big believer in that old adage that there are lessons about life that can be learned through sports. And that's true for all sports. But let's be honest here. The pursuit of some sports has more of this to offer than do others. And as I learned a bit about this sport through preparing to do this video and through talking to the athlete who we're going to meet here in just a few minutes, I really think that this sport of adventure racing might represent the pinnacle of values or virtues that are applicable toward life itself. So the athlete is Ben Kwiatkowski. And in alignment with what I was just saying about his sport, this guy has got to be one of the most well-rounded, generally capable, best overall humans I've ever come in contact with. Put it this way, in the event of a zombie apocalypse, I now know the guy who I would have to be my #1 overall draft pick to have in the group with me. Okay, not only is Ben the team captain of Expedition Canada, but in his day job, if you will, his professions, yes, plural, professions, include CAA Avalanche Professional and Registered Professional Forester. Now, I invite you to do a quick Google search of the kinds of things those people do. And talking about life lessons, let me give this one teaser. Okay, near the end of our conversation, I asked Ben what are the characteristics that would make an elite adventure racer. And Ben gave a one-word answer. And it had nothing to do with physical fitness, although that is obviously a necessary component. For example, Ben himself has a history of endurance racing across multiple different types of disciplines with many podium finishes. Plus his careers, like I mentioned before, afford him the opportunity to have overlap training towards adventure racing. Nor did he say technical skills, although things like paddling white water or rappelling down a cliff or orienteering itself are all, in this case, very sport-specific skills that have to be mastered, but that was not Ben's answer either. So then, what was the one word? I'm not going to tell you right now. You got to watch to the end of our conversation, but trust me, it'll be well worth it given all the really cool things Ben has to talk about. Now, before we do get to that conversation, I do have one final treat for you. And the timing of this works out just amazingly because it was only a few months ago when Canada, specifically beautiful British Columbia, hosted the 2025 Adventure Racing World Championship. And this is a special thing. For example, there was 25 different countries represented at this World Championship, and they change the host country every year. So if a secondary goal of mine here on this channel is to promote a little Canadiana, I really have to focus on this particular World Championship race. And in doing so, before we get to the conversation with Ben Kwiatkowski, who captained a team through this very race, I'm going to share with you a video, a promotional video for this World Championship race. Now, I came across this video myself in my preparation for our conversation, and I thought it was just spectacular. So I reached out, I contacted the race director, and he and the other good people at Expedition Canada very generously and kindly said I could use it in this introduction. And for that, I am so grateful and appreciative, because in just 2 minutes, this awesome video does a way better job than I ever could do verbally of describing what the sport of adventure racing is all about.
Next September, come experience true wilderness. Unparalleled adventure. An unrivaled sense of wonder, of connection, where the journey and the destination are one. Immerse yourself in a vast, ancient land, sculpted by history, steeped in tradition, protected from time, where wildlife is still wild, nature is supernatural, and the spirit is everything. Days, 700 kilometers. Come challenge your body, your mind, your soul, your limits. Come find yourself in the struggles and lose yourself once more in the awe-inspiring majesty. Come leave your mark and help leave a legacy. The Adventure Racing World Championships, British Columbia, 2025.
Ben Kwiatkowski, please tell us where you were born and raised.
Hey everybody, nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on, Dennis. Really appreciate it. I was born in Huntsville, Ontario in Muskoka. Spent half my life there, and as soon as I finished high school, I moved to British Columbia, and I've now spent more than half my life in BC, chasing the mountains, chasing the outdoors.
Speaking of, Ben, why adventure racing?
Well, to answer the question of why adventure racing, we need to understand what adventure racing is. And to sort of prelude that, the why of adventure racing is bundled in with what adventure racing is. And the why sort of encompasses pushing your limits, pushing beyond what you thought that your limits were. You keep pushing further and further, harder and harder. And that sort of is a good segue to what it actually is of how we are pushing our limits. And this is, we talk about ultra endurance events. I would put this into an uber endurance event. Now, adventure racing is quite broad. Ranges from, let's say, 20 kilometers up to 800 kilometers, ranging from, at the low end, a few hours up to, 200 hours, nonstop. Now, the sport is multidisciplinary, so it involves running or trekking. We run as often as we can, but at those lengths, you can't run the whole time. Biking, which is on mountain bikes, combining single track technical riding with gravel riding, usually off pavement, but sometimes some pavement as well. Paddling, multiple different disciplines in paddling depending on the race, often pack rafting. So sometimes we carry the rafts to the next section, paddle through white water, flat water, sometimes on kayaks, sometimes in canoes. And then ropes are added in as well. So it's climbing, rappelling or abseiling, traversing high alpine sections. So it includes all these sports, and often I'm asked, hey, is it like an Ironman? And well, the winning time for an Ironman, I'm not sure, 5 to 8 hours, I think, is a fast time for an Ironman.
8 for sure.
Yeah, and to put that into perspective, at the World Championship race that we just did here in BC, that we hosted, winning time, I think, was 120 hours, and teams are coming in 140, 200 hours. So it's very
crazy.
very long distance. Some other key components are that there's no set route. It's all off of map and compass. No electronics, no GPS allowed. It's all map and compass, going checkpoint to checkpoint, which are sometimes dozens of kilometers away, navigating off-trail, bushwhacking through the alpine, crossing rivers, crossing streams, and creating your own route to move between checkpoints. Now, the set points are the transition areas, and that's where they have your equipment for you. And we pre-pack bins ready for us, and the race organization will move a very, very limited amount of equipment for us, where we transition to the next sport and then move on from there. And it's not just, 4 legs with the 4 disciplines. It can be up to 12, 20 different legs going between sports. And the other big factor is that the clock starts when the gun goes off, and your time finishes when you cross the finish line. So if you sleep, you're not moving forward. So it's a huge part of the strategy is choosing if, when, where, how to sleep. And you can imagine the sleep deprivation that we end up in. Average nights are between 0 and a high end would be 3 hours of sleep. So on a long race like that, 100 hours of racing, the winning teams are averaging maybe 4 hours of sleep or so.
Ben, some of these things that you've said, it sounds almost, in my professional physiological opinion, almost seemingly impossible. The things that you athletes put yourselves through, yet, as I think a message that you might agree with, it is possible. At the end of the day, you guys and girls do these things, although to the outsider looking in, man, like I said, it sounds seemingly impossible. And on that note, let me just say one last thing, Ben, before we get into what you're going to lead us through here in this conversation, because, Ben, I believe honesty is the best policy, eh?
Absolutely.
I do not know too much about the sport of adventure racing, okay? There's a few sports, okay, to put it in context. Hockey, I know my hockey, Ben. I could talk a bit about baseball. I could probably talk a fairly good game about running. But there's also been a few sports, okay, where I wouldn't feel comfortable talking to an athlete. Like my example would be the sport of golf, okay, because I don't know golf, and there's such a big audience of golfers out there. How do I say it? They'd be able to tell, Ben, that I was being a phony, if you know what I'm saying. Like I would betray my ignorance to the sport of golf in trying to converse with a golfer. So I'm laying it all on the line here and now. In the sport of adventure racing, I'm somewhat of a novice. You're going to lead the conversation. I might throw in some questions or tidbits about the physiology going on around here, but adventure racing, not my number one sport that I know about. And I think that's probably true of a lot of the audience. They don't know about this sport, Ben. It's somewhat of a niche sport. So I'm comfortable. I'm confident saying that this is new to me, and that's why we have an expert like yourself here is going to lead us through this discussion of what sounds like an absolutely incredible sport, that being adventure racing. So here's how I envision this unraveling, Ben. You mentioned already this the race that was just in British Columbia. You called that the World Championship. So maybe put that in perspective. On the, I guess we'll call it the professional level, at the highest level that there is here on planet Earth. Tell us how the season is structured, culminating in this race that just so happened to happen here in Canada last month.
Yeah, you bet. And just before I jump into the World Championships there, just, you mentioned there that it's a niche sport, and that's absolutely the case. There are very few people doing this sport in the world. That when we go to the World Championships, we look around, and at a World Championships, there can be up to 500 racers, and we know many of them. It would be hard to say most, but we know many of them, or faces that we recognize. So it is a very, very small sport. And another key component there that I forgot to mention is that it's a team sport.
Yeah.
So there are 4 people on a team, and it's
Yep.
not relay style. You don't get to take a break. All 4 of you are moving together at the same time, and everybody has to keep moving. You can't separate, otherwise you'll be penalized. And if one person drops out, then the entire team is out. So there's
Team is gone.
some very interesting human factors at play.
Yeah.
With a team of 4 that's navigating this.
Yeah. So interesting.
But let's
multiple things of interest. Yeah, so go on. Talk about the World Championship and what it means within the context of a season of adventure racing.
For sure. So the parent organization is the Adventure Race World Series, and events are held worldwide underneath this parent organization that has certain rules, certain stipulations for a race to be considered to be part of the Adventure Race World Series. And those races span across the whole breadth of lengths and times. Let's say at the low end being around 24 hours, maybe 8 hours for a World Series event, up to the long 100-hour events. Now, there are certain qualifiers within that if you win one of these long events, then you are guaranteed a free entry to the World Championships. After that, teams are able to register to the World Championships with a bit of an application. There's a bit of a vetting process there, knowing these teams that are applying and if they will be accepted to that. And for the first time since, I think it was maybe 20 plus years ago, we held the World Championships here in Canada, which was fantastic, being able to welcome the world to our stage and show them BC. For folks that haven't been to BC, you've heard a lot about BC with the mountains, and I say we because I am part of the organization that hosted the race, but I kept myself separate from the actual planning so that I could do the race, but still providing a lot of feedback to the organizers on putting it on. So this race started in Pemberton, which is a little bit north of Vancouver, and then traversed through the mountains to a town called Penticton. It was about 800 kilometers. I'm just going to pull up some stats here because there were multiple different legs of quite long lengths. So we had a total of 16 legs in this race. There was biking, trekking or hiking, and running, paddling with pack rafts, and then some rope sections. So the total stats ended up being about 20,000 meters of elevation gain. So I think that's about 66,000 feet of elevation gain over the course of the race. There was 160 kilometers on foot, 460 kilometers on mountain bike, and then 155 kilometers of pack rafting, of paddling. There was a little bit of canoeing in there, but most of that was pack rafting. Organizing a race like this, we have teams from around the world, from Sweden, Japan, the United States, all over South America, into Europe, some African teams as well. It was really interesting bringing all of these teams here. So I guess a good way to sort of share some of the aspects that are really interesting about adventure racing are let's paint a picture through the race and how it panned out for our team.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting.
So to start off, we started with a mountain bike ride. You can imagine.
So let me just hang on. Let me make sure I got this clear. This is the beginning of the race. There's you said 500 athletes at this race, at the World Championship?
In this one, there were about 250 racers in this one.
And they're all lined up at the starting line in the same way they would be like at a 10K. Is that right, Ben?
Yeah, we did it Le Mans style start, which means that everyone starts on foot with their bike shoes on, their helmets, and you have to run to your bike and then start.
Like a gun goes off and the race starts.
Gun goes off, about to push yourself into 100 plus hours of racing. Gun goes off and everybody's guns a blazing out the gate.
Hey, their guns are blazing? They're running off the start?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There's no pacing of yourself. Anyway, so the gun goes off and everyone takes off. Keep going, Ben.
So everyone takes off, ends up on their bikes. There's a large bike section, 45 kilometers, get up to a high mountain pass where we drop the bikes and then do an orienteering up through the mountains, up through some glacial terrain, up into some higher alpine for 15 kilometers on foot back to the bikes, continue on the bikes for another 50 kilometers, and now we're getting onto the lake with our pack rafts. So I'm skipping ahead just to get us to some more interesting parts because now we're pushing into the first night.
Do you remember? So how much time has elapsed at this point? You're getting into the paddling. So how much time had gone
About
by?
12 hours. About 12 hours.
Ben, I think,
Yeah.
honest to God, man, I think you're, I think you as an adventure racer, you're desensitized to this.
You bet.
Oh, it was about 12 hours.
Absolutely.
It was about 12 hours.
Yeah. I
But I
just did
mean,
100K of biking,
yeah,
50K of running.
athletes, this is not a normal occurrence, man. In no sport, like you
Mhm.
gave the very apt analogy at the beginning, like an Ironman triathlon. Like the race is now over after that length of time,
Yeah.
and you're
Mhm.
hitting the bar. But this is, as you just said, day one has not even happened yet. So anyway, I'm trying to put it in
Mhm.
perspective to the average Joes out there. 12 hours have gone by of a little bit of running, sprinting even at the start, biking and trekking, orienteering. 12 hours have gone by, and now you said you're getting into the water. Is that right?
Getting into the water. And
Okay.
great point there, Dennis, that I forget that I become desensitized to it. That, the first 12 hours of a race, it feels like a warm up. It feels like we're just getting going. And in actuality, that is the case for a lot of athletes, especially some female athletes, especially the the female on our team is my partner. We train together, we live together. She's my partner, and we race together. And it takes her a little bit more time to get in stride. Mm-hmm.
I wanted you to talk about that as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. You mentioned there's four on a team.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me from my research that I did that the structure of all these teams, Ben, is three males and one female. Is that standard, or is that the rule, or is there room for manipulating that? How does that work?
There is. So the rule is at least one of each gender.
At
And
least one.
just the way that the ratio goes with the number of athletes in this sport, there are more men drawn to this sport than females.
Yep.
So usually it's three males and one female, but sometimes we see two and two or three females and one male.
Okay.
Sometimes in races they allow single genders, but they will be unranked, meaning that they're not competing for the podium.
I,
That to be a ranked competitive team, it needs to be co-ed.
okay. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, any any thought as to why that ratio is the case? That you said more males are drawn to this than females. Is there a consensus within the sport as to why that is?
I don't think so. Not that I know of. I would say that it would be similar to exploring other sports and why we see certain team-based sports or certain endurance sports and why there are different ratios of the genders attracted to those. I can't parse out anything unique to adventure racing. Um, we could postulate different things, but I don't think there's been anything conclusive as to why.
So whatever is the reason, the reality of the world is it's about a 75 to 25% ratio.
I would say
Usually
approximately, yeah.
is how
Mm.
three men and one woman on most teams, but not always.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
we could get into more of that, Ben. But let's keep going along through the race because you
Sure.
said you got some great stories coming. I know. Actually, Ben, let me just pause for a second.
No worries.
Okay, I don't mean you have so many stories, but I have some questions as
We're
well.
good. For sure.
All right, so 12 hours have gone by. Let's talk about what you might have eaten during this
Sure.
period of time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to guess the answer is not nothing. Although, based on the mind boggling types of things I've heard already about sleep, which we're going to get into, nothing would shock me anymore about this sport. But I would think that you might want to fuel yourself if you're, operative word, racing over that time. So, talk a bit about what you might have eaten during that first 12 hours of the race.
Yeah, for sure. That's one that is often asked of what do you eat over that many days to keep you fueled and keep you going. Now, a key component of it is having food that you want to eat. Because in 6 hours, you can force anything into you and
Yep,
you can force it down. Once you
yep.
hit 12 hours, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 6 days, you will only eat what you want to eat. And
So
we
interesting.
so we sort of divide it up into three categories. The first category is liquid calories, mostly
Okay.
carbs, often maltodextrin with a little bit of fructose, high carb drinks that it's easy to get calories in quickly, easy to
Hmm.
get carbs in quickly. often the case in shorter races of high carb, 90 plus grams of carbs per hour in those short, high intensity races. But we need more than carbs. We need to get in the fats.
Definitely.
We need to get in the proteins. Need the full
Definitely.
gamut of everything.
You really do.
So that second category is foods that we want to eat. Foods that I'll pull out of my pocket and think, yes, I can't wait to eat pepperonis. Or,
yeah.
Freeze-dried cheese or candy or crackers or anything that's exciting to bring out that you can bring out and share with the team as well, because the best thing to eat, the most exciting thing to eat, the one that you want to eat the most is the thing that's in your partner, your teammate's pocket. When they pull it out, it's something that you haven't seen in a while and you want to share that and eat it.
Wow.
So then through those sort of extra things, we mix in some proteins, fats, and carbs. We don't think too much about the nutrients, because by just aiming for the things that we like, it ends up being sort of a broader spectrum.
Yeah.
The liquids being the high carbs to keep you going, and then the snacking sort of foods to build up some of those other nutrients.
Yeah.
And the third component that we add in is real food, because after some time, you can't just survive on liquid calories and snacks. I mean, you can, but you end up with some serious mouth sores, with some serious mouth cankers after that long, and just food fatigue, I guess, with the decision making of what to eat. So adding in whole foods, and a big one that we like is freeze-dried meals. So when we get to a transition area and we have some time to kill, we'll add some water to a freeze-dried meal, throw it in the pack, and then on that first couple of kilometers out of the trek, just eat those freeze-dried meals just to feel like you're getting something wholesome and real in your body again. But of course, trying not to overload, trying not to push into those 1,000-calorie intakes just because it feels like too much in the gut.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Ben, I think your answer, look, honest to goodness, this is why I talk to people like you. The whole idea of me doing this, and a big thing in my course, is to make it as real world as possible. And I ask you about, the nutrition for fueling an adventure race. Ben, it's wonderful to talk about what this or that might say in a laboratory, but your answer was stuff that you are excited to eat. That was the first thing you said. I think that's so telling. You can count carbs and grams of fat and whatnot, which probably has some importance. But the first answer you said is, look, when you're out there, what do I feel like eating? Because these Ben, honest, like these pencil neck geeks with the lab coats, they don't know what it's like out there on the course, and they can postulate what's the optimum ratio of different types of sugars. But you got to want to eat the thing, or it's going to be of no value whatsoever. So that was a very, very interesting answer, I think. Now that being said, let me put on my own pencil neck geek lab coat for a second, and ask you: do you folks do things like counting the grams, of carbohydrate? Like, put it this way, Ben. And whatever you said, I'd be fascinated to hear. I think it could go either way. I think it would be a very reasonable answer. Like, are there targets of grams of carbs that you want to eat by this time? Does it get that specific? Or is it more like your first answer, which is just, I'm going to go by how I feel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. And it's definitely a mix of both. That we aren't just going to the grocery store and pulling things off the shelf because they look tasty. We do a little bit of that, but then we come back and we do make calculations and run the numbers and make sure that we're hitting certain targets. And one target that's often talked about is carbs, of course, for endurance racing. And we get a lot of that from the liquid calories that we always have accessible. So we're making sure that we are getting a substantial amount of carbs through that. When it comes to those snacking foods, we only count really calories through that, as long as we're trying to balance the protein and fat and carb through that, because the liquid calories are so elevated in carbs that if we balance the others with the snacking foods, it still bumps the carbs up substantially, bringing up the fat and the protein as well. And one thing that we do aim for is about 200 calories per hour. That
200 calories per hour. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for the duration of the race. And we don't try to fluctuate of when that happens, more early in a race or higher intensity, etc. because we don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know the race until we're at the start line when we're given the maps.
Yeah,
We don't
yeah.
know how intense a section is going to be, etc. So, sure, on a paddling section, I like to have foods that are easier to eat, to pull out one bar and eat it, as opposed to trekking. I like to have smaller snacking things that I can, take my time eating one by one.
Mm-hmm.
So with the 200 calories per hour, we plan that out over the race. We also don't know how long each leg is going to take. So sometimes we get partway through a leg and then need to start rationing ourselves to stretch that food a little bit longer. So we do count all of these things, but because there's so much unknown in this sport, that we can try as best as we can, but we don't actually know how long we're going to be out there until we get our next resupply. Sometimes up to 30 plus hours before we get our next resupply.
So interesting. And I'm going to ask you one last question from the point of view of nutritional science. I've done a guilty thing here, and I've focused on carbohydrate, Ben, which is not totally invalid. But listen, that whole body of literature about the carbs being so important comes from the sport of endurance, endurance racing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we need to put in context of what you folks are doing. It's above and beyond, Ben, and I think it's above and beyond the capability of carbohydrate alone to fuel. Like if you're in a marathon, no one talks about fat loading for a marathon, 2.5 hours of running. But you guys and girls, you have to avail these other nutrients too, fat and protein, like you mentioned. So you're trying to get all of them, correct?
Exactly, and this comes from experience. This comes from and seeing other racers trying that. There have been racers who have tried to go 6 days on just carbohydrates and they can't do it.
No, I wouldn't.
Sure,
I wouldn't
they
think that
can,
would
they
be a good
make it to the
idea.
end, but it's not a good idea. You need those nutrients over that many days, that many hours.
It's such an extreme type of thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So interesting.
And so important with wanting to eat something. If you're on a strict carbohydrate diet, getting too sick and tired of that and literally getting sick.
Yeah.
We have teammates that get sick during races and we just have to keep going. Or my partner Kia pulled out a certain type of bar that she had multiple of that day, and she burst into tears because she just didn't want to eat another one of the same bar again.
Man, oh man. It's so interesting. Anyway, we could talk about the nutrition all day, but you're telling a story here, and I cut you off, but only for the sake of interest. It's so interesting to me. But you picked it up. You left us off. You're getting in the water, the first water section, and what are you doing again? This is paddling. You said canoe. You pick it up from there.
No worries. So at this point, we're paddling our pack rafts. If you're not familiar with a pack raft, we use tandem boats. Imagine kind of a kayak style that you're front and back with a kayak paddle, but wider with raft style pontoons. And the whole boat can fold up and fit in about a 50-liter backpack and weigh about 15 pounds just for the boat. And then all of our extra gear, our dry suits, paddles, helmets, PFDs, glow sticks, safety gear, etc. So we paddle these. It was a flat water section with a 15-kilometer up about 700 meters of vertical up and over to the next lake where we had to carry the boats and then continue paddling, which even in and of itself isn't that interesting for us during that sport. But the really interesting part that comes into factor here is the sleeping, because this is the first night. And in general, with adventure racing, with the top teams, you do not sleep on the first night. You push all the way through and push into the next day. And it becomes...
It's amazing.
The sleep is another question that always comes up of how much do you sleep? How do you choose when?
Yeah.
And the answer is it's complicated. There are many different factors, because you might be needing to push through a section to get through a cutoff. Or there are sometimes sections on these races, like there was in this one, where there is a dark zone. Now, the dark zone means you cannot paddle, or usually paddle, but you cannot progress through this part of the race at night. And in this case, is because we were paddling.
You mean you physically can't, or you're not allowed?
And it's too dangerous to paddle at night.
Okay.
Not allowed. too dangerous, and most racers wouldn't want to because of the safety issues of paddling that sort of whitewater at night can be
Wow.
quite scary and quite dangerous.
Yeah.
So if you reach that section at night, you need to sit and wait and stop. But if you push very, very hard ahead of time, you can make it through that in the daylight and then be ahead of the teams that are behind that dark zone.
This is the strategy you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. And then some other components that fit into that, strategy are where to sleep. Is it raining outside and do you want to find shelter? Is it going into a technical section where you want to sleep ahead of going into that because you know that your cognitive abilities and decision making are compromised? And then the other factor is how much to sleep. Now, in general, aim for about, let's say, 1 to 3 hours per night, depending on the night. I would say maximum 3 is a lot of sleep at night.
3 is a lot. Wow.
So in this race, we had a dark zone basically right in the middle of it on a large river called the Thompson River. And we pushed very hard leading up to that, trying to get ahead of it. Unfortunately, we didn't. We were hit by that dark zone and we had to stay there for some time. But the first half of the race was about 65 hours of racing, and we slept for about 1.5 hours. We then were able to have a reset in the middle of the race, and then the last 75 hours of the race, we only slept for another 1.5 hours in the middle of that.
This is what I was alluding to, Ben, at the beginning. It sounds like it's almost physiologically impossible for a human to do that.
Mm-hmm. And I like that comment to loop back to the why, because for myself and for a lot of racers, that's a big part of the why, is pushing yourself beyond what you thought that your limit was. I would bet that there's nobody out there who hasn't done this before who thinks that they can race for 75 hours with 1.5 hours after already having raced for 65 hours with 1.5 hours of sleep, pushing through the Alpine in close to single digit temperatures, 5-degree temperatures, pouring rain, soaked to the bone through multiple nights. You push past your limit, and that's something that you learn, is that you reach that point where you thought that you couldn't go any further, and you keep going, and you end up on the other side stronger, more resilient,
wow,
more grit, able to push through that. It's quite interesting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so interesting. Let me ask you about you mentioned about the sleeping and the technical decision-making component. Now, Ben, it's a team of 4, right? Who is in charge of making these decisions? Is it a group effort? You, by the way, Ben's the captain of Team Canada. But how is it determined who makes the final call? Take us through that whole process.
Sure. That's a conversation I really enjoy because it leads into conversations about risk management and decision-making when it comes to risk. Just a little bit of a background. In my career, I'm an avalanche forecaster where on the day-to-day, I'm making risk management decisions on how to manage avalanche risk for workers and for a road. It's an industrial site in very northern BC where we have 3 meters of snow on the ground right now. And I make those decisions constantly when it comes to risk. And I've done a lot of training in that sort of risk management. So it's interesting looking at it from an adventure racing perspective, because when it comes to those decisions, every team is different. There are some teams where there is the captain and they make the decision. And when they say it's time to go to the bathroom, it's time to go to the bathroom. And unless the captain says it, you cannot go to the bathroom. And other teams, like our team, tends to be more collaborative, that we are all involved with the decision making. But sometimes that shifts to one individual or another. And I often do a lot of the decision making, having a lot of experience in the backcountry, a lot of experience with rescue. I've done a lot of mountain rescue in my career, in my life. I end up influencing the decision a lot. Whether or not I'm the one making the decision, I influence the decision a lot. Mm-hmm. But I also know that at times I'm not the one to make that, because we all ebb and flow into where our cognitive abilities are relative to that sleep deprivation. That there are times when I am not the one to be making that decision, or I'm becoming stagnant in that decision making. And just a quick story that I'd like to tell. It's fun to talk about the nuts and bolts, but sharing stories is always fun. And one from this race here.
The best.
In the latter half of the race, we ended up in the high alpine, very high alpine above tree line, where we were in a rope section. And we had been going for, I think, about 36 hours at this point without any sleep. And this is the later half of the race. So you know that we're already very sleep deprived coming to this section. We then start to move down out of the alpine into what ends up becoming very, very steep, very dangerous terrain in the middle of the night, pouring rain and about 5 degrees Celsius. And at this point, we are so sleep deprived that we are actually hallucinating. And I'm sitting there recollecting the team, and I see one of the team members look to the other one and say, "Hi, who are you?" Thinking that they were another team and thinking that they were carrying boats with them in the middle of the forest, which they weren't.
I shouldn't laugh.
It is comical. And getting to that point, the hallucinations are very real. And with enough racing, you start to recognize when they are hallucinations. But sometimes they come quite shockingly, and you don't recognize that. But at this point, we are cold, wet, tired, hallucinating. We thought that this section would take us about 20 hours, and we're now 30 plus hours in. So we are almost out of food, extremely malnourished at this point, needing to make decisions about how to get out of this terrain. It's very steep with cliffs, quite dangerous terrain in the rain as well. Trying to make that decision, do we continue or do we turn back? And that is a classic decision in adventure racing, because with human factors, when it comes to decision making, we often talk about how there's something put on the pedestal, often a summit or a goal, that we are going to compromise our decision making and take on more risk to achieve a goal.
Yeah.
Perfect example, adventure racing. There is the goal to finish and win and push as hard as you can and do it at any cost. Now add in all of these factors that are impacting your decision making and your risk management, completely causing you to make poor decisions and trying to do that safely while you're out there in the bush. And this is a key reason that there are 4 people on the team. That if you were out there alone in this state, it would be even more dangerous. So in this case, trying to make that decision, do we continue forward or do we move back? And it's ending cyclical, moving forward, moving back, moving forward, moving back, trying to make that decision. And eventually my partner Kia said, "Hey, Ben, stop. Let's go through the process. Let's slow it down, because your brain is always firing during these races as fast as possible, making these decisions split second sometimes, and to stop it sometimes and recollect and make an informed, safe decision and decide whether to continue or to go back." And at that point, we decided to turn around. We decided to go back. Moving backwards through the course, and after about 10 minutes, we got some more information of the terrain around us, and we stopped again. We said, "Hey, are we making the right decision? No, let's continue." And we pushed forward, and we were able to get through that section successfully as a team, making that decision together. And another big factor that influences that decision making is the fact that we are not following a set route. Of course, sometimes you are following a road and your route is very clear in front of you, but in this section, it wasn't. We were in the middle of the bush with no trails, no landmarks around us other than the contours on the map and our compass and reading where we are. Now, that's a very big component of adventure racing, is the navigating. And there is usually one main navigator who makes the vast majority of those decisions. And that's myself. I do a lot of navigating outside of racing as well. I have a lot of experience working with maps and compass as a professional forester as well. That's my summertime career. So making those decisions of how do we move through this terrain? Do we go left? Do we go right? How do we maneuver through that to be as efficient as possible and try and get through as quickly as possible? Because decisions when it comes to navigating can be the difference between literally dozen hours sometimes if you make the wrong decision. So it's it's really, really interesting when that decision making comes into factor when it is a dangerous situation, let's say.
Ben, so many things you said there are applicable, I think, to life in general, not just adventure racing. Like I heard in the midst of what you were saying there, how about the notion of moving backwards to move forward? That could
Mm-hmm.
apply to all kinds of things, not just adventure racing. The the
Yeah, you bet.
the collaboration, the interpersonal dynamics that must go on, man. When you're making these hard decisions, someone might want to be, more competitive, more driven than the next person to reach that pinnacle, the win, as you describe it.
Mm-hmm.
While others are more concerned about, let's be honest, safety. So much stuff to navigate in this sport. Let me ask you a couple other questions. As you're telling these great stories, a bunch of things came into my mind. You mentioned at one point they're almost out of food. Ben, please tell us how much food are you carrying in any given section, and do you pick up more food at the transition points, or how does that work? The amount of food that you're allowed to carry with you at any given time.
Sure. So before a race, I said that you don't know what's happening until the start of the race. That's when it comes to the maps. We're told about a week ahead of time roughly the distances and elevation for the legs. So a week before, we knew that there were 16 legs. We knew which sport. We knew the distances and elevations. And then we run calculations to try and estimate how much time. Now, at the end of each leg is a transition area where we have a bin with our whatever we want in it, including our food. So we know approximately ahead of time, but we can be completely wrong with those estimates. This section
Wow.
we're off by many, many hours, so we didn't have enough food for that section.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of carrying things, another thing you mentioned there. At any given time, how much pounds of stuff are you carrying?
Mm-hmm. So fortunately, within the sport, there's a list of mandatory safety equipment. Things
Oh,
like a fire starting device, things like a bivy sack, so a waterproof sack that you can crawl inside of, a certain weight of fleece for on top of you to stay warm, a tent or a bothy bag as a shelter. So a decent amount of mandatory gear so that you would be able to survive a certain amount of time on your own as a team out there. So that gear, of course, increases. If we are in the very cold, high alpine, then we want to carry more gear to be
yeah.
safe, but at the same time trading comfort off for speed. That, through this section here, when we're making these decisions, we are hypothermic. We're mildly hypothermic. We're shivering, but we didn't carry more equipment because that would slow us down by having more equipment. So it's a very, very fine line of how much equipment that you bring to be safe, but also be able to move quickly. Now, of course, a long section, a 20, 30-hour leg, will have a lot more food than a 3-4 hour leg. Also, knowing that we're going into very remote locations, we might bring a little bit more. We might bring one puffy jacket in case somebody gets injured. And then we share that weight around, depending on who's feeling good, who's feeling fast, who's needing a bit of recovery. We'll share that weight around. So, Kia, for example, might be wearing a 5-liter running vest with just a couple hours worth of food and some water and some nutrients. And one of our other teammates might be carrying 30 pounds worth of gear to offset some of the load for the others that aren't feeling as good. So I would say, in general, up to about 30 pounds. Unless we're carrying our pack rafts, then those bags become upwards of 40, 50 pounds for carrying the boats and all of the equipment.
Wow. Tell us, Ben, about the end of the race.
Sure. So we finished this section. After that was, I won't go through the details, but a little bit more biking, a little bit more trekking, a little bit more paddling to the tune of
Like 10, 12 hours
kilometers.
type of thing, right? Just nothing at all. What?
So before I talk about the end of the race, I just want to talk a little bit more about how the race was going for us up to this point, because
Absolutely.
adventure racing for us, for me, myself, adventure racing is relatively new. I have been an endurance athlete for my whole life, growing up with cross-country running, cross-country skiing, track and field in high school, transitioning to ultra running, and then finding adventure racing. Say about 10 years ago, I did a short race, dabbled, and then about 5 years ago is when I learned about these expedition length races. And we, on a whim, myself and 3 other friends said, why not? Let's give it a try. Let's throw in an application for a race in Fiji. Having never heard about these long distance races, didn't know anything about it, jumped in.
This is how many years ago, sorry?
This was 2019 was the race in Fiji.
Okay.
And if anybody's interested, Amazon Prime Eco Challenge is the race was actually filmed and televised. And you can check it out there. It's a bit dramatized with Bear Grylls, but you can get an idea of the race. So that was the first one. And since then, fallen in love with the sport and started increasing more and more in how many I've done. Up to the past 2 years, I think I've done about 10 or so adventure races. So building up in the sport, gaining more experience through the sport, bringing the world championships to our stage, we were putting some pressure on ourselves. And me in particular, I had a lot of internal pressure on myself for performing on this sport, knowing that we had a chance to do well. And there was an early closure on the course due to a landslide, causing a closure on one of the highways, which set us back a number of hours, which then meant that we didn't make it through the next paddling section. So I won't get into too many details, but you can see the strategy there, that if you don't make it through one section, it can cascade through the race. So we ended up further back than we had expected, than we had wanted to. And that got us down a little bit. Me in particular, I was quite disappointed at that point. But that's what adventure racing is. There will never, ever be a perfect race. You are constantly being hit with different things. Different things are coming at you that you are managing constantly. And this just being one of them. And we bounced back from that. And in the second half of the race, after this rainy, dark, decision-making section, is the hardest that we have ever raced. We pushed as hard as we could, knowing that we weren't going to end up in the position that we wanted to, but knowing that we're there, of course, to compete against other teams. But for the most part, we're competing against the course, that we as a team of 4 are trying to do the absolute best that we can. And even if we're knocked back a little bit in positioning in the second 75 hours of racing, if we can push as hard as we can, we are going to do it. And that a prime example of that is coming out of this really exciting section, fully sleep deprived. We hit the next transition area where there was a little cabin and a fire, and we decided that we were going to stop and sleep for 3 hours, have a reset, and then continue on the race, which had about 200 kilometers of biking and about 10 kilometers of running, I think was the last bit there. And we were woken up after only an hour and a half. And your mind could go one way and think, we're not doing very well in the race right now. Let's just try and keep sleeping, forget about it. But no, all of us perked up, looked at each other and said, game on, let's go. So hour and a half of sleep, literally back in the saddle, and we were biking as hard as we could. We didn't end up catching any teams, but we just wanted to push our limit as hard as we could, just for the sake of doing that and just for the sake of trying as hard as we could. So in that latter part of the race, there was some biking. We stopped, had another orienteering running section, and then we were back on the bikes. And at this point, the sun was setting, and our last bike section was through the middle of the night. And this is, I think, night 5 or 6. And you can imagine the sleep deprivation that we're in at this point. And we are firing on all cylinders. We often tow each other on the bike if somebody's feeling a little bit slower, drafting behind on the bike. Lights as bright as they can go to try and keep ourselves awake, and pushing through the middle of the night. After all of this time, not sleeping as hard as we can, needing to pause a couple of times to check in on a couple of people. At one point, I became so sleep deprived that I couldn't keep up with the team. Even though my legs could, my brain couldn't, even on the bike. And I was slowing down, just fighting to stay upright on the bike. Team slowed down, we recollected, and then carried on. And something that we do use as a supplement, as an enhancer, let's say, is caffeine. That we save that for those key moments when you are really, really crashing, and a little bit of caffeine can perk you up. And of course, that's not a long-term solution, but can get you through to that next solution.
Yeah, an ergogenic aid for sure.
Mm-hmm. So finished that bike. We then got onto the canoes. We had a canoe paddle with headwinds and about 2-foot waves coming at us. We were barely moving in the middle of the night, hammering on the paddles as hard as we could in the canoes, trying to get to the far shore, and managed to cross all the way to the end of the lake. And then it was just a fun 1 kilometer run to the end, where one of our teammates and really good friends woke up at 3:00 in the morning and joined us for that last 1 kilometer. And you can imagine the feelings of running that last 1 kilometer towards the finish line, knowing what you had just completed as a team together, and sharing in that ecstasy and that glory together of running towards the finish line. Even though we're not crossing in first place, second place, third place, we came 12th place, which is the best that we've ever done. We knew that we could have done better, but we crossed the finish line. And the next day, the conversation is, how are we going to do better? How are we going to improve? How are we going to push our limit even further, even harder next time, and get back on the course even better and stronger?
I think, Ben, so many, again, stuff that's applicable to life, man, not just adventure racing, like competing within yourself, not finishing first or second or third. We're going to finish this thing because it's personally gratifying. That's an amazing lesson, I think. And let me tell you another thing, man, that you said that is not the first time I've heard an athlete say this. And you'll find this interesting, I think, Ben. The other athlete that said exactly the words that you said is Katrina LeMaidon, okay, who I interviewed, and she is the opposite of you in terms of what she does. She is a sprinter, a short distance speed skater, one of the all-time greatest in the sport of speed skating. But her races are seconds, Ben, 36 seconds or something. And she said the exact same words you did. You're never going to have a perfect race. The way she framed it is she's chasing the perfect race for her whole career, knowing you're never going to get there, but you're chasing it. So I think that's so cool, whether it be a 30-second sprint or what you do, which is the most absurdly long endurance thing you could be. You're never going to be perfect.
Yeah, never. And it comes down to how you manage those things coming at you. Do you manage them in the way that you can come out faster and stronger on the other end, or do you let it impact you mentally and therefore physically? And that's hard on a long race like that. And there are certain things that affect me in a very negative way, such as navigational decisions, because I know that if I make a decision that causes the team to backtrack for 2 hours or add multiple hours to our race, I wear that quite hard, and I can get quite angry at myself. And I internalize that. I get angry at myself, but I don't let it slow us down. I don't let it impact the decision making. And as soon as we've connected back on course, then it's completely forgot about it. And of course, learn about it and reflect on that later in even continuing through the race or after the race. And that moves into another thing that I'd like to talk about that I've thought of a couple times here is the team dynamic. And you've mentioned it there too, of how the team functions through all of this. And it's extremely interesting, both how each of us as individuals manage this and then how we as a team manage this. And the short answer is that a strong team is faster than any one of the individuals on their own. Not only because of sharing weight and the physicality of it and being able to tow each other on bikes and share in the paddling, but in the mental aspect, we as a team are much stronger and much faster than any individual. And I know this for sure because I did a long race, a 60-hour race solo this spring. And I found myself getting into a mental, slowed down, sort of complacent state more often and easier and harder to bring myself out of it compared to when we are operating as a fully functioning team. And we realize that, we know that. And as a team that races together a lot, one of our members he's been racing for 20 years and done 30 plus of these, I think close to 40 of these races. My partner and I, of course, being well connected, another member of our team, a couple other members of our team being very close friends as well, that we recognize these things in each other. We know how each of us react to these situations. We know what each of us needs. And it's not an ambiguous sort of deal with it as it comes, and we all need to understand each other. We actually talk about it before a race, during a race, after a race. That we have actually a call scheduled in a couple of days where we're going to sit down for a couple of hours and just talk about, what bothers us. How do we react? How can we help each other? When do we recognize that? And building ourselves up as a team. And this example of myself getting angry at myself during these navigational decisions, we've talked about that extensively, and the team knows what I need. I know that sucks for the team when I get angry like that. So I'm trying to manage that myself. They're trying to offer what I need. I'm trying to get out of that, because as soon as we're back functioning on all 4 cylinders with all 4 people, that's the fastest that we can be. And then recognize that in the rest of the team, when James has something happening, when Jasper, when Tom, when Jen, when Dave, when Laval, when Kia each have something happening, how do we manage that? How do we help each other in those cases?
Ben, what can we say? The ultimate test of human endurance and a test of human interpersonal relationships is the sport of adventure racing. I feel like you could talk all day, Ben, about this sport that you clearly love very, very much. I appreciate the hour and a bit that you gave me here this evening, Ben, to educate me and my students here about the sport of adventure racing. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you bet. It's my pleasure. I think it's pretty clear that I'm quite passionate and happy to chat about this sport. And I love it. It's crazy, it's wild, and it's pretty fun.
Sounds like it. Now, Ben, before you go, though, I think we can learn a little bit more about you. I always end these interviews with a little game of 10 questions. Are you up for playing this game?
Let's go for it.
All right, and this is just kind of like short answer off the top of your head. We are going to learn more about the sport of adventure racing, I think, but also we can learn about who is Ben as a human being here too. So I got 10 questions for you, Ben. Whatever you think is the best answer, you get the idea. You ready?
Sounds good. Yep.
All right. Question number 1, Ben. What advice would you have for someone interested in getting into adventure racing after they've heard you talk so passionately about it, maybe here in this conversation? What advice would you have?
We talked a lot about these crazy long races. There are short ones. Seek out a short race, try it out, and if you feel that you're not ready for it physically, the training, do something every day. Get outside, do something. Don't ever make it an option not to train, not to do anything physical. Just do a little bit every day. People think that we train 100 hours a week. Some days, like today, I'm going to train for half an hour just by stretching. So just do it, get after it, and find a short race.
What did I tell you? We're still going to learn from this man, and even in 10 questions. You mentioned about the training, and the advice you said was just get out and do something every day, like biking, paddling, climbing, whatever, hiking, running. These are the kind of things that you do in your training. Is that right, Ben?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
There you go. That was a bonus question. That wasn't one of the 10. All right. Question number 2. All right, Ben. Tell us. The question is, what are the characteristics that make an elite adventure racer? And again, if I was to compare this to a sport more people know about, my sport being hockey, if you were to say what makes an elite hockey player, well, they got to be able to probably skate pretty well, shoot the puck. Also, there's a mental component of knowing the game. That's very, very crucial in the sport of hockey. If you were to apply those kind of things to the characteristics of an elite of the elite adventure racer, what's your answer? What does such a person possess?
Talking about hockey with the shooting and the skating, that we can talk about all those physical components, but I think something that encapsulates all of it is a term that I heard many times from an old mentor of mine, not an adventure racing mentor, just through some of my careers, of grit, of keeping on going no matter what.
Yeah.
That it hurts, keep going. You're tired, keep going. You're hungry, keep going. Just keep pushing through it. Keep that mental tenacity. Keep the efficiency going. Don't let yourself slow down and become complacent. It's the grit and intensity and engagement to always drive forward. And everything else will come with you. All that physical preparation, all your food preparation, that will all come in the coattails of just driving forward with purpose.
Grit. I feel like, Ben, I've said this many times. This is life lessons, not just adventure racing lessons. Question number 3. Ben, if you had to say what was your favorite sport other than adventure racing, what would you say?
Skiing. Absolutely skiing. I've built my career around being in the mountains in the snow, and it would be skiing, especially backcountry skiing, and being able to wander around in the mountains and then ski on a big wide open slope or through, deep pow through the trees. It's 100% skiing.
Beautiful. Question number 4, Ben, what was the closest you ever came to dying during an adventure race?
Whoa, closest to dying. There have been some close calls with whitewater, being slightly pinned under a boat. But I'd actually, this is something I totally forgot to talk about, which is very applicable to the nutrition side of things, is in my first race, I became so sick that I was sick for many months afterwards. This was in Fiji. I don't know if it was bacterial, viral, parasitic. Don't know. I got a multitude of tests. The later half of the race, I was having to stop every 5 to 30 minutes on the side of the trail to, everything was liquid at that point.
We know.
And it carried on for many months afterwards. And talking to the doctor, we couldn't figure out what was going on. And eventually we decided to check the celiac markers. Sure enough, they were through the roof. I cut out gluten from my diet, got better, talked to a gastro later that year, and was diagnosed celiac, which was a result, an autoimmune response to a severe gut infection. So I wouldn't say that it's the closest I've come to dying, but I would say that it's the most life-altering situation.
We're here at the 1 hour and 20-minute mark or whatever, and you drop this bombshell that you're celiac. Wow, good. Well, what an answer. Okay, we got question number 5. Question number 5. Same type of question, because I was aware of your day jobs. What's the closest you came to dying during one of your day jobs, Ben?
I've had a few injuries through skiing. I have broken my back twice through skiing accidents.
Ben, I didn't know that either.
I would say that would be the closest.
Good God.
Yeah. I've also been involved in a few avalanches, dug partners out of avalanches that were buried. So, yeah.
We're going to have to schedule another hour and a half, Ben, I think.
Had a few close calls.
Wow. Amazing stories. Let's lighten the mood a little bit, shall we here? Question number 6. Ben, what is the tastiest wild game animal?
Oh, that would have been in South Africa. It was one of the types of box. There's many types. A spring bok is one that we often think of. But that suffix bok is on a number of different type of wild game animals there. And we did a world championship race a couple of years ago in South Africa. And we were able to go through a couple of small towns, and they had dried meat there that was all different types of bok. And it was so good during the middle of a race to have a salty, meaty, full of protein snack in the middle of the race. It was really, really good.
Wow. Not the answer I was expecting, but a very interesting answer. Next question is kind of the same, another nutrition type of question. After, Ben, you've done an adventure race, what would be your favorite go-to meal? Once the race is over, you're relaxing, the meal you want to indulge in after a race?
Whatever's in front of me. We are such in a caloric deficit But literally, you can't eat enough. It's nonstop eating. After a race in Oregon, we went to one of those, diner style breakfast places, and in the States
Yeah.
they list the number of calories next to everything, and our team of 4 added it up, and we had 14,000 calories on the table,
Wow.
and we ate it all. And a couple hours later, we were still eating.
Yeah. I was going to say your answer again is very, very insightful because when you're calorically deprived, folks, what Ben just said is 100% true. Everything sounds delicious. Your thoughts are encompassed by food when you're food deprived like that, and everything becomes delicious.
Definitely. And a
Anyway,
couple places that the mind goes after a race are fat and protein. My body really craves the fat and the protein again. Start building that back up. And then fresh things, fresh fruit, fresh veggies, because we haven't had much of that for a few days.
yeah, you crave them. Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Okay, where are we? Question number 8. Oh, here's the standard question, Ben. Every single athlete gets asked this, no matter if they're a strength athlete or, in your case, the pinnacle of endurance athlete. They all get asked this. Ben, what is your personal 1-rep max bench press?
I only started bench pressing less than a year ago. So I
Well,
have no idea. I've never tried
it's a very legitimate answer. I don't
because we
think
are
you need
so
a
endurance based. All of my
exactly.
training has been endurance my whole life. And of course, strength training is important to endurance. And it's only within the past year that I have a proper strength program and have
Yeah.
started to build in strengthening.
I'm going to take up some more of your time here. Just elaborate on that a little bit. I heard that you recently, so you come from an endurance background, obviously, but I heard you sing the praises of discovering strength training recently. So talk about just because that's my area, man, like the resistance training. Talk about how is that's beneficial to what you do and your process of finding it and what you might do in this realm of weight training.
Sure. I find that with the adventure racing, your endurance doesn't really get maxed out to a degree, because if you think about a 6, 10, 12 hour race, you're maxing your endurance as high as you can for that amount of time. And of course, you're pacing yourself. You're not going at 120% that whole time and then fading
No.
after it. You're pacing. But the pacing is so much different in adventure racing that the endurance and the cardio is sort of, to me, it's the past 5 years of cardio that I've done. It's not
Yep.
the last year of high intensity cardio. And of course, high intensity
Yeah.
helps with that. But the strength is where I find it builds that bottom end for when we need to push up a mountain and we need to climb 1,000 meters with 50 pounds on your back, or you need to carry your bike for a couple of kilometers. There was a race where we had to push our bikes through knee-deep snow for 50 kilometers. We weren't even able to ride them. And of course, endurance plays in a factor there, but I've found, I don't know a lot about the physiology. Of course, you know way more than I do about why the strength helps, but it's the biggest gain that I've seen since I can remember, because I've been so endurance based my whole life. To add that in just a little bit has been really beneficial. And I've brought on some other experts, a physiotherapist, a trainer, a dietitian, to chat with and have some conversations around these things and try and build some training plans. And summertime, it's all about endurance: biking, running, get out, do the kilometers, do the hours, get out there. And in the winter time, with my job here, I'm in a camp-based job for 2 weeks, and I have access to a phenomenal gym, and it's right there in front of me to be able to go there and dedicate myself to that strength program. I've had such a hard time before in my life to pull away from the sports that I love to do the strength training, because adventure racing it's a lifestyle training, that the training is the things that I love. And 100% of the time, I would rather go skiing, running, biking, paddling, climbing, rather than go to the gym and lift heavy things just to get better at lifting heavy things. But now that I have the gym here, I love it. There was a hurdle to get over of a bit of intimidation of being in the gym with others,
For
especially
sure.
I work at a mine, and some of the guys that are in there can be a bit intimidating to
Sure.
try and go into a small gym. And now I embrace it. Not only am I accepting it, but I'm looking forward to going and lifting weights and strengthening it. I feel that helping me become more well-rounded as an athlete.
Yeah. Well, Ben, look, I'm not lying. This is a true story. Just this morning, the other thing I did in front of this camera here today, I recorded a half an hour presentation called "The Single Healthiest Thing," and it was all about resistance training. Anyway, we got to go on here.
Nice.
That was a total bonus question. This is the first time ever we've had 11 questions, but that's we can. We can fit in 11 for Ben. That's okay. Only 2 left, and this is gonna be a great one, Ben. This is gonna be like pretend, Dear Abby. This is gonna be like Dear Ben, because Ben disclosed very openly that one of his partners on the team is also his, let's call it, life partner. So Ben, you need to give us some advice about how you swing that, having your partner in life also be your partner on the racing team. Because I know from my personal experience, for example, Ben, look, if I stay home in the house in the day instead of going to work, my wife is like, bah, 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 bah. She wants to get rid of me. But you two are like doing 600-mile adventure races together. So what's the advice of swinging that dynamic?
Well, I would say some advice if you ever want to test your relationship, do an adventure race. Try being sleep deprived, tired, hungry, exhausted, etc., 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 at your wit's end, making decisions in a split second, and do it with your partner. It's pretty testing. But what works well for us is during an adventure race, we are teammates. Of course, we are still a partnership, but we are teammates first. And the option for a domestic dispute doesn't exist in a race. The option for those sort of flare-ups and those sort of dynamics, we've sensed it in the past in a race, and just dispelled that immediately. That doesn't exist. That is not allowed on the race course. We're teammates. And of course, if we spent 6 days just being teammates, wouldn't be the healthiest, wouldn't be the most productive, wouldn't be the fastest. So we remind each other often through the race that, hey, just a quick hand touch, a quick, hey, how are you? Check in. We're partners. You're my life partner. Check in with each other emotionally. I'm not the most emotionally connected person during the race because I'm so involved with the decision making and the navigation that, to be honest, the emotional connection sometimes falls on some of the other teammates with Kia and the other teammates to be connecting emotionally with each other while I'm deep in the navigation. But I would say teammates first, but remembering that we're still partners.
Very, very deep answer. All right, we have come to the last question. Here's question number 10, and this is going to be a tough one, Ben, but if you could summarize, you've already given so many of these kind of nuggets of wisdom throughout our wonderful conversation here. But for my final question of you, if you could summarize, Ben, maybe the single best lesson that you ever learned from the sport of adventure racing?
No matter how hard things are, they can always be worse. And as long as you push through it, you will get to the other side. We can end up in a leg there was an example as a leg where we had to build rafts out of bamboo and paddle them on a river for 15 hours. I won't get into the details of how brutal that was, being half submerged in a bamboo raft for 15 hours, paddling them through a river. But any situation that I end up in now, I can look back and say, I've been in something more challenging than this. And if I get to a spot and think, whoa, this is the hardest I've ever done this before, this is the worst I've ever felt, this is absolutely brutal, I can think, well, I had that happen before, and I pushed past it, and I went further and harder, and I came out the other side not only still alive and breathing, but stronger and a better person after it. And there's no challenge that you can ever face that you can't overcome. You may need to pull away from it, like we talked about. Sometimes you need to go back to go forward. But there's no challenge that you can't overcome with tenacity, with grit, with purpose, with intention, that you can push through it.
Ben, what can I say? One of the most insightful, one of the most interesting conversations I ever had here. And it's because of the nature of the sport that you do. Adventure racing itself is so interesting, but also I think, Ben, just you as a human being, you have some very interesting, insightful things to say. So, what can I say other than thank you for agreeing to do this with me here this evening?
You bet. And thank you, Dennis. I really appreciate it. Great questions there. Great conversation. I think we went in a couple different directions that were really, really interesting. And I think we captured the heart of adventure racing and some of the really, really cool components.
There we go. So, on that note, folks, I will sign off like I always sign off by saying, let's go Canada, support Canadian athletes.